Welcome to the show, everyone. How are you today? How is your week coming along? I hope you're having a fantastic week because it's wonderful being alive, right? Today I have a wonderful guest. This man is a father. He's standing up for children. Um, I think everywhere because of the things that he does. His name is Billboard Chris, and he goes around wearing a billboard with very simple statements on them, and they're also rather powerful. It's kind of like if Steven Crowder, changed my mind kind of thing, but with a bold statement and just, you know, out there to call attention to what is happening with this gender ideology being taught in schools. Welcome to the show, Billboard Chris. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, Adam. Thanks so much for having me. I'm having a good day. I talked to about 30 parents earlier this morning for a few hours
Did
about
you?
these
30
are all
parents.
30 parents who all have boys who are affected by this craze. So boys who now think that they're girls or
Wow.
young men as well.
And is that from all over, or how did you group them together?
Well, a parent reached out to me. She's part of a parental support group. There
Yeah.
are parental support groups in every country dealing with this. And so they just reached out to me, maybe for some insights about how best to talk about this with their kids. And I'm certainly no expert on that, but I've had 5 or 6 thousand conversations on the street. So I've maybe gained some insights on how best to approach this with people.
How long have you been doing this?
September of 2020 is when I started. I started
Okay.
with a big billboard that said, "I love J.K. Rowling"
Because
in
she's
Vancouver.
she's
Yeah.
going up against the wave, really. I mean, she's one of the few celebrities that openly talks about it. It's pretty incredible what she's doing.
Yeah. And there was a woman who had put up a sign that said the same thing, named Posey Parker in the UK. She put up a sign at the Edinburgh train station and it got taken down. And I'd been learning all about this and I just got tired of our speech being taken from us. So I said, forget it. I got 2 girls myself. Girls are getting harmed by this a lot. And so I put up a billboard. It lasted a day. It got taken down because a Vancouver politician said it was hate speech.
Oh, goodness.
It had a big heart on it. And then I did a whole bunch in the US.
Hold on. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I heart J.K. Rowling. That's what the billboard
That's
said?
all it said. Yeah.
That was considered hate speech.
Yeah.
Wow. Just think about that. That alone. I mean, you're not even getting into any specifics. You're not saying why. You're not saying because she's standing up for women's rights, because she's standing up against, not even against trans people, just about the definition, or just women's rights really is the core of it all. That's incredible, man. But please
Yeah.
continue. So you then
And
moved
she got
to
into the child medical scandal a bit as well.
okay,
But
that's true. Yeah.
then there was a lot of outrage on Twitter, and I was sort of prepared for this. I wasn't totally surprised it got taken down. I wanted it to stay up. I had signed a contract for 3 months at first, with an option to extend it.
For the billboard.
Yeah, and I was just going to leave it up indefinitely because it generates conversations, and that's what I'm all about. But
Yep.
it got taken down after a day. So then
One day.
one day,
Oh my gosh.
they brought in guys they paid guys overtime on a Saturday to come and cover it up.
Wow.
And the first truck that they brought out, the guy gets up in this, hydraulic thing, and he's way up in the air there, and the machine broke. I'm not a godly guy. I'm not a religious guy. Maybe there's
Yeah.
a God. I don't know. I'm agnostic about it all.
Okay.
But I thought maybe this is a God moment because the billboard was able to stay up for a couple more hours as this guy was stranded up in the air. And then they had to bring out another truck, and they got the hydraulic arm to join up with that one. And then the guy hopped out of one into the other. And anyway, they eventually took it down. And I leveraged all the outrage on Twitter into a little campaign, and I raised some funds, and I put up billboards in San Francisco, Los Angeles, Portland, Utah, Washington, D.C., and Times Square.
Wow.
All throughout September of 2020. And then because I can't do anything in Canada, I can't put up a sign. We really only have 2 major sign companies.
Okay.
And none of them will do anything.
And were all those signs I heart J.K. Rowling? Same thing?
Those ones were, yeah.
Okay. Wow.
And so then I was on a mission. I set out to go on a big war before that first billboard, and so because I can't do anything else, I had some signs made, like protest signs.
Yeah.
And I wear them like a sandwich board, and I look silly, I'm sure, but
Actually, I have.
I just hang out on busy street corners. I go to events, and I knew before I started all of this that if I kept going, yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
I knew if I kept going day after day, I knew I'd get a lot of ridicule and all that, but I knew this would grow into something and get me on podcasts like yours, and events happen, and I get counter protesters, and I've been attacked several times. I've been arrested twice. A couple people have been arrested, assaulting me. There should have been
What
a
was
lot
the
more.
charge? What was your charge when you got arrested?
The first time I got arrested was in October of 2020.
Okay.
And I was at the Vancouver Art Gallery, which is a huge public square. It's where all the protests in Vancouver go on.
Okay.
And that day there were probably 3 other protests going on. There was some big one going on. I didn't even know what it was for. I learned later it was about a lobster fishery in Nova Scotia or something.
Okay.
I didn't even know. But anyway, I just go to wherever people are. And that day I got surrounded by all these Antifa types, and they wouldn't let me walk.
Mm.
And there were about 15 or 20 police officers there. So I just sauntered over to the police and said, "Hey, guys, are you going to do anything about this? Because I'm being encircled and not allowed to move." And they said I was instigating. I was wearing a sign on my front that said, "Gender ideology does not belong in schools." That was the first sign I had made. And I had one on my back that said, "I love J.K. Rowling." And so the police weren't going to help me. So a second time I walked off the sidewalk into the public square, and a guy came and knocked my phone out of my hand because I was filming all of this, which I have to do to protect myself. And I walked right back to the police. They all said they didn't see it. And again, they blamed me. So for a couple minutes, I argued with this guy, with these 2 officers. And this one guy said, "I'm telling you not to walk into that square." And I said, "Wait a minute. I'm in Canada. This is a public place.
Yeah.
And you're telling me I'm not allowed to walk freely just because I have a couple signs?" He said, "I'm not saying anything." And this other police officer, Anthony Blackman is his name, he said that this is a safe space. And I didn't know what that meant at the time because I was naive.
Goodness.
I've never been an activist. I don't think I've ever gone to a rally for anything in my life. Just to put this in perspective.
Okay.
I had some crystal clarity about what was going on, and I decided to take a stand because this is all too crazy. And I don't care about my own life. I care about my girl's life and the world that they're going to have. So anyway, a third time I walked in off the sidewalk, about 20 feet off the sidewalk into this huge public square. I didn't realize it, but police were following me. And a guy, his name is Robert Ages. He's a union rep, actually. He came and hit me like this with both of his forearms, kind of up here. And I just took it, and immediately I was grabbed from behind by police, handcuffed, taken to jail, charged with causing a disturbance.
Was he arrested for
No.
hitting you, for assaulting you?
No.
Wow.
And so the conditions of my release, I was in jail for about 4 hours, fingerprinted, all that stuff. Conditions of my release were that I would not walk on 4 different streets in the center of downtown Vancouver. And I was charged with causing a disturbance. And 6 months later, our Crown prosecutor, which is like your state prosecutor, finally, they threw out the charge like a day before my first court hearing. And so then I was free to walk again in the middle of Vancouver.
Wow.
And then another time I got punched in the head from behind, sucker punched. I stopped that guy from running away. I gave him a single push and I stopped him from running away.
Yeah.
And then I walked away to de-escalate. I waited for police to come and they arrested me that time too. Then they released me and they told me that I am allowed to make a citizen's arrest, which I knew. And I was basically doing that because I got tired of getting assaulted. I've been spat at and all sorts of things. I've been punched numerous times. I've had my arm broken. But that was fine. I got arrested. They released me. They'd reviewed CCTV footage, and this guy had admitted on camera to punching me from behind. Wow. And then 3 months later, fast forward to the beginning of March of 2021, 3 months after that assault, I get a phone call from the Vancouver police stating that they were looking at charging me with assault, causing bodily harm for my single push after this guy had punched me. And it freaked me out because, these police forces aren't working for me. They're working against me. They're looking for any reason to get me, really, because there's political motivations involved. One of the top brass at the Vancouver Police Department, for example, is married to Sarah Kirby Young, who is the Vancouver City Councillor who said that "I love J.K. Rowling" sign was hate speech.
Was hate speech.
So there's all sorts of political connections. And anyway, I said to myself, okay, I'm never, ever touching anyone again. I have to be like Gandhi. I just have to take all the violence that comes my way. And sure enough, a week later, I was in Montreal, 7 p.m. on a Friday night, 1 hour before their curfew. And I got attacked by 5 or 6 members of the Montreal Antifa, or whatever you want to call them. I instantly got punched in the face, punched in the back of the head. Both my signs were ripped off me. I lost my body cam. A guy went into the middle of the street and stomped on it. And a few of those guys fled right away. And I was mad that I lost my body cam. So I pulled up my phone to film them for police to get their images. And a man picked up a large traffic cone, like an orange pylon, and he started swinging it at my head. And 4 times I blocked it with my left forearm. But the base on those traffic cones is pretty thick. And one of those blows, I think it was the second one, snapped my ulna. So
your what?
My ulna, the bone on the outside of my forearm.
Broke your arm. Wow.
Yeah, I broke my arm. A clean break. I had surgery on it a month later, so I've got a steel plate in there now. But that's what you get for saying children cannot consent to puberty blockers, Adam. Controversial. I don't like kids being sterilized and have their body parts cut off. So I'm fascist. Yeah,
Chris, I was called a Nazi yesterday because I was saying the same kind of thing. There's such an uproar with people on the internet that are like fighting to allow that kind of behavior, and it's like, well, you don't let a child get a tattoo. Why? Well, because they don't know. Children aren't adults. They can't make decisions. They can't understand that there's ramifications for getting a tattoo, and that's just getting a tattoo they're not allowed to do, let alone take life-altering drugs that will potentially scar them for life, or mutilate their bodies in life-altering forever. They might be cut off from having kids, or being cut off from orgasming in the future. It's just like these things they can't understand. I agree 100%. Kids cannot consent to any of this. They do not understand. These adults are acting as if children can, and I don't know when that changed. What's your opinion on that? Like, when was there such a drastic change in that attitude towards kids? Just your opinion on when that changed.
So this is primarily coming from the left of the political spectrum.
Of course.
And to put things in perspective, there was a father who leaked audio to me from a school in Toronto, called Beaumont Road, and it's this father's 12-year-old child had recorded the teacher giving a lesson on gender identity. And this lesson's totally crazy. You can listen to it on my YouTube channel, Billboard Chris. But I went to that school, and I went to a street corner near the school wearing my signs just to talk to parents, just to have conversations. That's all I do. And they knew I was coming. The principal had emailed every parent, and the whole community. It's in this area of Toronto called the Beaches. It's right on Lake Ontario. It's this expensive woke area, and the whole community, it's all they were talking about. So it was a really successful trip. But they put up signs all over the telephone poles and everything saying things like, children know who they really are, and stop telling kids what to do with their bodies, and kids know who they are. No, they don't. Okay?
That's what they're doing. They're literally doing that.
A girl who thinks she's a boy is mistaken.
Correct.
She's a girl.
Yep.
There's no such thing as changing your sex. There's no such thing as a child born in the wrong body. There's no such thing as a trans child. Transition is something you do, It's not something you are. And historically, this has been something for adults to do if they've had long-standing gender dysphoria or distress about their sex.
Correct.
And they all knew, all these transsexuals back in the day, predominantly men who were transitioning, they all knew that they were still male.
Yep.
Now we are teaching that gender identity essentially trumps your biological sex. And we're enshrining this into law. So in the United States, for example, you've got Title IX, which is this piece of legislation that, for example, guarantees girls and women their right to compete in sports against girls and women. But now they're refining sex to include gender identity. So as soon as you include gender identity as a substitute for sex, you actually eliminate the category of sex, because now any man can just say he's a woman. And as we've seen in the University of Pennsylvania with this swimmer, Leah Thomas, who was 452nd in the world, now he's first. And he's hardly kicking to finish some of these races as well. It's just a total joke. But yeah, maybe we should get into the science of medically what we're doing to kids, because that is the principal thing I campaign on.
Yeah.
But essentially this gender ideology, we get into this too, it just teaches these kids that stereotypes define what they are.
Exactly. You know, I've talked about this often, and that nails it. Like the stereotypical man, like if you don't identify as that, you know, like the bro that, you know, is buff, that likes to work out, it, you know, goes after women. It's like, if you don't identify as that doesn't mean you're not male. That just means you're not that type of male. Like, you can be a feminine man. And, you know, some people on the internet have fought back on me on this. And it's like, you have to at least acknowledge that, or else you have to let them have this. And I do not agree with what they're saying. So feminine men exist. Masculine women exist. That doesn't make them men. That just means that they're more on the masculine side of, you know, stereotypically masculine. You know, the masculine traits and feminine traits are two different things. I was listening to a Twitter space yesterday hosted by Brandon Strock and Mikey Harlow, and the Buck Sexton, I think is his last name. You know, biological female, now identifies as a male.
Oh, Buck Angel. Oh, is Sexton the last? Yeah.
No, Buck Angel. Yes,
Buck Sexton's someone different, I think. Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah, Buck Angel. That's correct. Sorry,
there is a Buck Sexton, but I think we're talking about Buck Angel. Yeah.
Yes, you're right. There is a Buck Sexton. So Buck Angel was basically saying, "Look, I am a female. I understand that I'm a female, but I'm a transsexual. I'm like the whole idea that, like, the word trans, for it to make sense, there has to be two. The fact that they're like trying to get rid of it is actually ruining it for the people who have gender dysphoria, and they're like, you don't really matter. We just want to convert all these children." And it's like, it was pretty insightful to hear someone and relieving, actually, to hear someone that is trans, you know, say, like, this is insane to have this kind of stuff going on for children, because they have no idea what they're doing. Like, you know, they're kids. Kids have no idea. But I do want to hear more about what they're medically doing, because I don't actually know, you know, the medical. I have this article that I mentioned earlier about these teachers that were secretly giving the kids hormone blockers, and I'm appalled by it. And you're like, well, I don't know how that works, because you have to get a medication for it. And it's actually from Libs of TikTok that posted it. It's a Connecticut school. It was the school nurse that was suspended. Yeah, was suspended. So it was the nurse that was able to get the puberty blockers. 11-year-olds. Insane. So tell us more about it, though.
So first of all, this drug has never been approved for this purpose.
Well, that right off the bat is insane.
Yeah,
because it's for adults.
It's for adults. Yeah, so there's various conditions that this drug is used for. I'll go into them right now. So technically, this drug is what we call a gonadotropin releasing hormone agonist. No one needs to remember that. All it does is it stops the pituitary gland from releasing a couple of hormones called luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone. These in turn trigger the testes to release testosterone or the ovaries to release estrogen.
Okay.
When kids go on this drug, that's not going to happen. So boys aren't going to have testosterone. They're not going to enter into puberty. Girls aren't going to release estrogen. They're not going to enter into puberty. So their breasts won't grow. Their hips won't get wider. These kids' bones don't gain any density. One of the side effects of this drug is bone demineralization.
Wow.
There is a fabulous documentary series done in Sweden called The Trans Train. Stopping the Trans Train, I think it's called. People can Google that. In the 4th episode, which came out a few months ago, this young girl suffered spinal fractures and has osteopenia, or early stage osteoporosis. She's a teenager.
Wow.
Because she went on this drug. I talked to a mom in California a few months ago. Her daughter was on this drug from the age of 12 to 15, and they did bone scans every year. She lost 11% of her bone density. This is at a time when her bones should be getting way stronger.
Right.
Because kids' bones are soft. They get much stronger during puberty. That's not going to happen. Boys' penises won't grow. This affects all sorts of other organs. It affects cognitive development. Puberty itself, the hormones that come naturally in puberty, do all sorts of things, and they do all sorts of things that we don't even understand. Because our bodies are complicated systems with billions of processes going on every day. We evolved over millions of years. Humans have probably only been on this planet for 300,000 years or something.
Mm-hmm.
But we're still these incredibly complex systems with all these interrelated parts. And now we're just going to give some off-label synthetic drug to kids to stop their bodies from going into puberty. And we think that's all going to work out just fine. And then that's just the first step. Because the reason they block puberty in these kids is because they don't want them to experience the distress of looking more like their sex. But the cure, historically, for gender dysphoria is the child's own hormones. And I'm going to get into the next step, which is these cross-sex hormones that we give to these kids in a second. But if we go back in time, 50 years, we have studies into gender dysphoria. Because the word gender, as we use it today, has only been around since the 1950s. Gender previously was just something used linguistically, like in the French language, for example. You've got feminine and masculine terms, right?
Right. Yeah.
We never used it as a synonym for sex. But throughout our lifetimes, we've all just basically used gender as another more polite word for biological sex. But it's evolved. And anyway, this term was invented by a doctor called John Money, who was a doctor at Johns Hopkins University, who did experiments on children. He specifically did an experiment on a baby boy who had lost his penis in a botched circumcision. There was a couple in Winnipeg, Canada, who this woman gave birth to 2 twin boys. And at 8 or 9 months of age, they went to get their circumcisions, and this electrical device malfunctioned and basically burned this little boy's penis off. And this mother saw some advertisement for John Money's research or whatever, and she contacted him. And this was exactly what John Money had been looking for, a live child to experiment on with his theories of gender identity. So he told these parents, let's just castrate the boy completely and raise him as though he's a girl. We'll give him a girl's name, grow out his hair, dress him in girls' clothing. And I guess he theorized that this child would just really have no differences than most other girls.
Yeah.
This guy's a sicko. You can watch a documentary about it on BBC.
That sounds horrible.
He met these kids every year, both boys. He even had them like doing sexual things to each other, meeting with them without the parents present.
To each other.
And long story short, both these kids killed themselves when they were adults. But anyway, he invented the word gender as we use it today. The word gender identity wasn't coined until the 1960s by a man named Robert Stoller. And we used to refer to this as gender identity disorder, when these kids felt this mismatch between their biological sex and their gender, whatever gender means. All it really means is the stereotypes associated with each sex.
Right.
And so this used to be called gender identity disorder in the diagnostic and statistical manual that psychiatrists use. In the DSM-5 that came out in 2013, they changed the name to gender dysphoria. Now they're changing it again. And basically it's evolved from a mental illness to something that we now teach children that they all have. We're teaching all these kids that they all have a gender identity.
Right.
And if you teach a child they have a gender identity, what's the next step? They have to figure out what their gender identity is. How do they do that? They're going to look at some of these ridiculous materials like the genderbread person. And I don't know if I can share my screen on here. I can bring it up if you want.
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
Okay, really let me bring that up. And then I'm going to backtrack again because I'm rambling.
Well, while you do that, I'm going to, something that was brought to my attention. One of them in this talk last night, someone was speaking. I don't recall everyone who was speaking in this spaces on Twitter. They were talking about how there was a group that was saying, hey, you know, we just want to let everyone know like what stocks to invest in, and over the next couple of years, like trans medicine, like invest into that kind of stuff, because the money, you know, because this whole trans movement, like we're gonna make a killing on the trans movement. And it's like, it's all about money. They're trying to sell these drugs, and you know, not all about money. That's not the only thing. I'm sure there's multiple things.
Yeah,
you know,
it's
and they
not
mentioned
all about it.
Right.
It's a big part.
They mentioned depopulation. They mentioned, which I also think is another reason. There's, you know, that people are pushing behind it. There's a few things, and that scares me also. But yeah, were you able to figure out how to share your screen?
Yeah, can you see my screen? I guess not.
It hasn't popped up for me. So if you click share screen on the bottom.
Oh, I have to click it again. Here we go.
Yeah, and then it should pop up. You select which one you want to share, and then hit share, and it'll show to me, and then I'll bring it out. Someone just said it all comes back to eugenics. Mm-hmm.
It's my share button is now grayed out, and I can't do anything with it.
Well, if you would, is it a website you want me to share?
Yeah.
Just post it.
I'll put it in the chat for you.
In the private chat, yeah, and I'll just I'll bring it up for us. That's fine.
Okay, there you go. So this is the genderbread person. Of course, it's given a gender neutral name because it can't be a gingerbread man because that's too gendered, of course.
Yeah.
But if you scroll down to
person, oh my God.
Scroll down to gender identity there, where it says womanness and manness, and there's that little bubble beneath.
Right here
on the left side. Yeah, there you go. It says gender identity, womanness, manness.
Oh, here we go. Yeah, I see it.
And there's that gray bubble.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the most used resource all around the world. It's in teachers use it all the time. You'll find it in gender clinics at children's hospitals even. And so it defines your gender identity right there. This is all this ever comes down to. So, Adam, your gender is based on your personality, your jobs, your likes and dislikes, roles, expectations, hobbies.
That's so ridiculous.
Does your job determine whether you're a man or a woman? What job is podcaster? What does that mean you are?
I have no idea. I talk on the internet. Like, how is that, you know, men and women out there talk on the internet? How is that anything to do with it? Likes and dislikes?
Hobbies, roles?
Yeah, none of this has anything to do with gender. None of it. Absolutely nothing. And expectations? Like, what is that? What does that mean? You know, I don't want to expect anything from anyone because you always just get disappointed. I try not to expect anything from anyone because I can only trust myself to do, you know, to uphold the things that I adhere to on my own. I never think gender when I'm thinking that, you know, personality traits. Like what is a female personality trait? To nurture, maybe? Is that a personality trait?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, right. You know,
roles. So I don't know, working in the kitchen, doing the cooking. I guess that I guess, I mean, this is all based on 1950s stereotypes, so I guess that makes you more of a woman.
Right.
We have a documentary that was just produced here in Canada by our state broadcaster called CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, basically Trudeau's personal network.
Yeah, I hear all about that.
Yeah, they're the worst. Well, they're all bad up here, but they produced this documentary about this trans child, and it was this boy who liked playing with girls' toys, and that's one of the ways he knew right away that he was a girl.
Oh my goodness.
You tell this to people, they don't believe it, but this is
I believe it.
The entire thing is based on.
And I think we're at this point where everyone's starting to realize it really is happening. It really is true. Like there really is this movement to you know what? I'll sum it up with this conversation that I was having yesterday on Twitter. So I posted, remember that the gay chorus in San Francisco? It was like the gay man's chorus, and they sang "We're Coming for Your Children," that ridiculous song. And I was having this, the person who commented like defending it. I was like, are you really defending this? Turns out, like in his bio, he was in the choir, right? And I was like, oh, okay, so of course you're going to defend it. He was stating that like, oh, well, no one cared when the straight choir sang the song. And it's like, well, it didn't go viral, and I would have absolutely had issues with it. And then it came out through the conversation. Not really. It wasn't really a conversation. It was more of a back and forth. He's like back, trying to win. And it came, they said something about, we're just trying to teach like morality to these kids. And I'm like, so like there it is. You think that you have the right to teach what is morally correct to other people's children. And that's why you're wrong. That's why you are in the wrong, because it's not your job. It's not your job to say, hey, your children need to learn this to be morally correct in this world that they believe in. It's like, that's not your job. You have no right to teach other people. Like, that's up to the parents. Hey, look, I have nothing against people who are gay. I don't care. Look, if you're gay, you could be gay. Like, whatever. You can't change that. It's fine. If you're an adult and you say, look, I've been an adult my entire life, I've been very uncomfortable in this body, I'm gonna go through the motions and change it. It's like, all right, that's fine. Like, you do you. Like, that's fine. But as soon as you start teaching or going after people's kids, I don't care, gay or straight, it does not matter. You're in the wrong, period.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's what they think. They think that they're morally correct in this. And that's the scary part behind all of this. And that's why they can't.
And they refuse to have a conversation. All they can do is shriek.
Yep.
And yell and call bigot. And anyway,
we're morally correct, so shut the F up and just allow us to teach these kids this stuff, because we know that's what they need. It's like, no, you're wrong.
And you're so terrible for wanting to have a conversation that we're going to punch you in the face.
You've been assaulted. You've had your bones broken because you're standing up. And you know what? I meant to say this earlier. Major respect, dude, for doing what you're doing, because I talk on the internet. Like, I'm a podcaster. That's what I do. I talk. I have a show. I talk about many different subjects. And I always am asking, how do you make a difference? How do we actually get to a better place? Right. Because that's the whole reason I talk about different subjects. And one of the main things is getting out there and actually doing something. And that's what I see you doing out there. And I just want to say, I have a lot of respect for what you do. Especially because you have been attacked, you've been arrested for doing what more people need to do.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a wild ride. I might write about it one day, but right now I'm still busy for a few years at least, just having conversations about this, and hopefully more media starts coming along.
Yep.
But
agreed.
Real quickly, just to get back to this drug.
Yeah, please. Yeah, go back.
So it stops puberty from happening. This drug was designed to treat prostate cancer in men because it's testosterone that feeds the prostate cancer, so it stops that from being generated.
Okay.
It was also proved to treat endometriosis in women, which is a uterine issue. Same exact drug, Adam, given to pedophiles to chemically castrate them.
Wow.
Because that's what it does. It's a chemical castration drug.
This is what they're giving to kids.
This is what they give to kids. Now, for women with endometriosis, and I'm sure some women watching this have had endometriosis, they might have been on this drug, and they'll be able to relate. All sorts of terrible side effects, and because of that, they only go on this drug for a period of not longer than 6 months. That's the recommendation. But they'll give this to kids for the duration of their puberty.
Wow.
And these activists will tell you that it's fully reversible. It's just a pause button. So that's just a lie, because time is not reversible. Sure, if you give a kid this drug for 3 months and take them off, not too much harm done. But in practice, and we know this from statistics from gender clinics themselves, like the Tavistock, which is the one gender clinic that all the kids in England went to, still go to. They're in the middle of revising their whole system because it's a disaster. A really good report just came out. But anyway, the Tavistock is the gender clinic in England. Their own study showed that 98% of the kids who started on puberty blockers went on to the next step, which is the opposite sex's hormones. So, a couple things. We know from historical studies that 80 to 90% of kids with real gender dysphoria, not this craze that's going on with teenagers today, but gender dysphoria that persisted their whole life.
Yeah.
80 to 90% of them just grew out of it. Because the cure for this gender dysphoria in almost all cases is their own hormones. This traditionally affected boys way more than girls. That's completely flipped. And it used to only affect maybe 1 out of 3,000 boys, maybe 1 out of 10,000 girls. Now you get high schools where 1 out of 10 kids say they're transgender or non-binary.
It's just trying to be cool. It's the thing.
Well, these kids are the kids who maybe aren't the coolest, who are not fitting in. A lot of these kids have autism.
Mm-hmm.
From the Tavistock, again, we have good statistics from them. 35% of those kids were on the autism spectrum. Tons of these kids have ADHD. A lot of these girls, and it's mostly girls today, that never felt this way growing up, but it's hitting them when they get into adolescence. Social media, social pressures, school pressures, all that sort of stuff. Girls who've suffered sexual abuse. Guess what? When a girl gets sexually abused, she's probably not loving being a girl,
right?
Because that's the source of her abuse.
Good point.
And if you give these kids an option where they can just opt out of their sex, some will jump at it. And this is what we see every single place this is taught in schools. Kids will transition.
Yep.
A child would never entertain the idea of being the opposite sex unless someone else put that idea in their head.
Absolutely.
And it's all throughout the culture, social media, everything. Lots of these kids have had trauma. Kids who are in state care, orphans, foster kids, are wildly overrepresented amongst the children showing up at these gender clinics. It's all kids with something going on who are having a tough time.
Yep.
And for a lot of girls, guess what? They hate puberty because it's making their life hell, especially these girls who develop early. If you read, it's fairly close to the top of my Twitter. There's a story from a woman named Athena. She wrote her first Substack article just a couple days ago.
Okay.
Her Twitter handle is Mother Gender. And when she was 16 years old, she's in Seattle area. I've met her. We hung out on the street one day at the University of Washington. But she's told her whole story. I encourage everyone to go read it. Mother Gender is her handle on Twitter. But she developed really young. And she got, poked at by the boys and leered at by the boys and the men. And her breasts were a source of great discomfort for her. And she wished she didn't have them and all that, like so many girls when they're young.
Yeah.
And she wasn't doing well in life. She's since been diagnosed. I think she had autism and ADHD. But she didn't have any friends. And she was playing video games. This is how so many kids get into this, is through video games. Or websites like DeviantArt or Tumblr or TikTok or Reddit or whatever. But she met some friends through playing video games who were trans. And so she made this one friend who was trans, then she made another. And they related to her. They made her feel heard. And that they could relate to what she was going through. And she didn't have gender dysphoria. She was just having a tough time growing up, like so many kids do. But she got indoctrinated into this trans cult thinking that maybe this meant she was trans. And at 16, she got a double mastectomy. She went on testosterone. So I haven't even gotten into the cross-sex hormones yet, but they cause all sorts of problems for these bodies, these kids' bodies, because they're not meant to be in these kids' bodies. Right. It's not how we're designed. And testosterone, for example, with these girls, it causes uterine and vaginal atrophy. So they have to get hysterectomies after 4 or 5 years. They're getting oophorectomies as well, which is when they cut out their ovaries. So now for the rest of their life, they'll never be able to produce estrogen, even if they decide to detransition. And when you start them on this process with these opposite sex hormones, so testosterone for girls, you're turning them into lifelong medical patients because they need to stay on testosterone forever.
That's what I said. That's what they were talking about yesterday. They were like, invest in trans medicine. These people are going to have to be on this medicine forever. Like, isn't that the best thing to invest in? If you're some scumbag pharmaceutical investor that's like, what do I invest in that's going to get people that they're going to use forever? And that's what they were talking about, is this kind of situation where they have to be on it forever. Man, that's horrifying.
These puberty blocking drugs, they get them either as an injection or they get an implant under general anesthesia that'll get put into their thigh or their upper arm, which is good for about a year. Those cost over $40,000 a year.
Jeez, money.
So yeah, there's lots of money in this, and pharmaceutical companies are partly to blame, absolutely. But I think the biggest source of all of this is the activist organizations. All these LGBT organizations, and I don't use that term, LGBT. I use LGB.
I like that.
Refers to sexual orientation.
Correct.
And I use TQ plus for
all
the weirdos pushing queer theory.
Yep.
And so when gay rights were won, around the turn of the century, you've got all these activist organizations with all these employees and all these donations coming in. When an activist organization achieves their goals and they win what they set out to do, they don't just fold up shop and say, thanks, guys, we did it. They move on to the next target.
Right.
And so the next target for all these activist organizations was trans rights. And this has been presented as the new gay rights movement. And it's absolutely nothing of the sort. If you look at one of the more recent studies we have into gender dysphoria, it followed 139 boys from young ages, 5, 6, 7 years old, all the way into their 20s. 88% of these boys, when they went through puberty, their gender dysphoria, which was severe and prolonged from a young age, 88% of them, their gender dysphoria just went away. 64% of them grew up to be gay men. So what this is doing is not all these kids, because today it's changed too.
Yeah.
But a lot of these kids will just grow up to be gay or lesbian. And they're being taught and they're being coerced into believing that they're trans. And that the only way they can be their true self is by going on these puberty blocking drugs and opposite sex hormones and getting double mastectomies as children.
It just dawned on me. I'm sorry. This is almost like gay conversion therapy. Like you're not allowed to be gay or lesbian. The only, like, if you're into guys and you're a guy, you're a girl. You can't be gay. It's almost like it's the opposite, right?
Yes. Thank
you.
That's exactly what this is, Adam. This is harming. I don't use the word gay kids or trans. I think we should just let kids be kids and not sexualize them at all.
Thank you. I agree 100%.
But some kids know they're gay, like in their teens. They know it. I have lots of gay men who are friends now, and they tell me when they were younger, they had gender dysphoria. They wanted to be girls. If they were growing up today, they would absolutely jump at the opportunity to transition.
Okay.
But instead, they grew up and they discovered that they were gay and whatever. But yes, this is the real conversion therapy. If you look at Iran, in Iran, it's illegal to be gay, punishable by death.
Yeah.
So these men have two options. They can die or they can transition, and then they can be in a relationship with a man as a trans woman.
Does that happen? Does that happen out there?
8 members of the Iranian national women's soccer team are men.
Wow. I have no idea. Wow.
8
So
out of the 11
so
starters are men.
that's crazy. So they see it and it's a death penalty if you're gay, but you're allowed to
Be trans.
be trans. And I
So
mean,
the
what's
gay men, a lot of these gay men transition, or they have to escape the country, or they can die. But we're doing that here, and we call
not
this
much of an
progress.
option. Yeah.
This is progressivism in North America. Well, the whole Western world. Because no one on the left side of the political spectrum, none of these Democrats dare to cross the transgender lobbyist queer theory faction of their party.
Right.
Because they know as soon as they do it, they're going to be labeled a bigot against the LGBT. It's got nothing to do with LGBT.
Right.
This has to do with reality or not.
Yep.
That's all. And if an adult wants to transition, go for it. I would hope, my personal hope would be they wait until they're 25 because their brains are still forming. I would hope they would get mental health therapy and get fully aware of all the side effects because they don't know. I talk to trans people all the time.
Yeah.
They come up to me on the street. I talked to about 10 of them when I was at the University of Washington 2 weeks ago. Some of them agreed with me, some of them didn't. But a lot of these trans people even have no idea the actual side effects. They're not told. They're lied to, or they're lied to by omission when they go to these gender clinics.
Do they even know the long-term effects? Because we're talking about the short term. You said that these women that actually take this medicine only take it for 6 months because it's the
endometriosis.
The effects are quick and you feel them. So it's like 6 months and that's it. But
there's bone pain, there's sleeplessness, there's mood swings, all that.
But that's immediate. Like, do we know even long term? It's
no.
What?
And if you look at the consent forms that these children sign, it states right on the consent form. I should have sent some to you beforehand, but it says right on there we don't have the long-term information.
Oh my gosh!
So how can a child give informed consent?
Right.
But these kids now and these young adults, they can just walk into Planned Parenthood, and Planned Parenthood operates on what's called the informed consent model. They do nothing. They do no counseling, no assessments, no blood work, anything. You just walk in, you say you're trans. They say, fantastic. We are so glad you found your true self. And you walk out of there with a prescription for testosterone or estrogen.
Jeez.
There's a woman on Twitter called Helena. I think that's how you say her name. Lacroix. LACROISCZ is her handle.
Okay.
But when she was 18 or 19, she drove 5 hours to the nearest Planned Parenthood. And when she got there, the clinician told her, wow, you've shown such dedication by driving 5 hours. You must really be trans. And she walked out of there with a subscription for a very strong dose of testosterone.
How old was she?
I think she was 19 at the time.
Okay.
So she wasn't a kid, but still, no.
I look at 19-year-olds and I see kids. They're kids.
Yeah, they're kids, and they're not getting into all the side effects. They don't know what they're doing. There should be a stringent process when you're altering your body for life.
Absolutely.
There should be a very rigorous process that you go through. If a woman wants to get her tubes tied at 25 years of age after she's had a couple kids, most doctors will say they won't do it because they know that these women, because they know women change their mind.
Right.
And you talk to women, I've had this conversation lots of times. So many of them will agree. They'll say they pleaded with their doctor at 26 years of age to get their tubes tied. And then 5 years later, they were chomping at the bit to have more kids. This happens a lot. But now we're just going to take children at their word that they know who they really are, when who they really are is the opposite sex. This is only in a cult would you sterilize kids and call it love.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw a meme floating around the other day. I shared it. It's basically like, we live in a country where, it's considered child abuse to, spank your kid when they do something wrong, but it's glorified when you chemically castrate them, for a mental thing. And it's like, that's some scary truth. You know, like
right.
I don't know if I don't have children, so like I don't I actually was spanked as a kid, and I think I turned out all right, and I didn't I wasn't spanked often, but I was smacked on the bottom when I was being an asshole as a child, but
Yeah.
there's I'm grateful that I'm still a man. Not that I feel like I did, I played with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle dolls. I wasn't playing with Barbies. But if I was, I still would be a man. It's not like, oh, he's playing with Barbies. Like, he must be a woman. Let's castrate him. Jeez.
Yeah. And so there's a couple other things we should probably get into. One is what schools are doing.
Yeah. Let's talk about it.
And then the erasure of parents' rights as well.
My goodness.
Parents don't have the right to stop any of this stuff. So schools, just to give one example, there's this organization now called the Transition Closet.
Okay.
And they receive government funding, of course.
Taxpayer
and
dollars.
They put into these schools, elementary schools, high schools, a closet with clothing for these children to change into.
Are you serious?
Yeah. So a girl can come to school and go into the transition closet and put on boys' clothes. And they also provide breast binders. Binders are these very tight compression sleeves that crush the breast tissue down and cause physical damage even, so that these girls appear more like boys. So those are provided as well. And then they change back into their clothes before they go home because parents aren't safe, apparently.
My goodness. That's what they want. They want people to believe
they want to drive a wedge, like all cults. They want to drive a wedge in between the children
and loved ones
and their parents.
Yep.
And where this becomes a real problem is with these children who are not neurotypical. Children with autism, for example, and this is a huge number of these kids. I want to say it's almost half. It seems like every second parent I talk to, their child's on the autism spectrum.
Yeah.
But it becomes really difficult to reach these kids because they fixate and they become convinced that this is the solution to why they're not fitting in. And especially if they're more into their teen years, they've been indoctrinated. They've been taught that parents don't understand. They've got this whole community that's supporting them and love bombing them like any cult does. Yep. The whole school can know that this child is now transgender, but they won't tell the parents unless the child consents.
Wow.
There's a woman in California. Her name's Abigail Martinez. And I'm going to retweet her video when I get off this call.
Okay.
But their family's from Venezuela originally, I think. I met her a month and a half ago in Washington, D.C. at a conference at the Heritage Foundation. And she told her story for the first time. And her daughter grew up just normal girly girl, happy, beautiful, wearing princess dresses, all that stuff, like all these girls do. Started getting teased when she got into high school. Went into a spiral of depression. And went to the after school Gay Straight Alliance or Queer Straight Alliance Club or whatever, and got love bombed, of course, and was told that maybe she's trans because she's not conforming to all the stereotypes or whatever.
Yeah.
Being trans means a lot of different things these days. These kids today, they're not even saying that they're the opposite sex anymore. Some of them just want to be trans. It's like taking on its own thing. But anyway, this girl wanted to transition to be a boy because she got indoctrinated at school. And mom, knowing her daughter very well, of course, because she's her mother,
right,
knew that testosterone was not the best thing for her child. But the state of California took her daughter away from her, put her into a group home. So she lost custody of her child. And this is not like some bigoted mother. She's like extremely reasonable and kind and got blindsided by this whole thing because it happened very quickly. The state took her daughter away from her, put her on testosterone. And while they were still separated, her daughter knelt down in front of a train and killed herself. And police had to pick up her body in pieces.
Oh, man, that's horrible.
Right here in British Columbia, I'm talking to a mom. She just had to meet with some social workers because the school counselor reported her as not being affirming enough. And they told her that if she's not immediately affirming her child's name change and new pronouns, that they consider it abuse. And they can take her child away from her. Other parents have lost their kids. It's happening all over the world.
It's horrible.
And parental rights are being taken away. We have all these different jurisdictions introducing these so-called conversion therapy bills, which are the exact opposite. They're ensuring conversion therapy of gay children is happening.
Right.
But all these bills basically say is that if your child says they're transgender, they're transgender. And if you help your daughter, for example, feel comfortable as a girl, that's conversion therapy. It's totally fine, and it's not conversion therapy to convince a girl that she's a boy. That's okay. These bills only work one way.
Yeah.
Helping a child to feel comfortable with their birth sex is now deemed conversion therapy, and nobody will talk to these kids. You cannot find a counselor for these children. I get parents from Washington State or Oregon or California contacting me up in Canada to find a counselor for their kid. Because no counselor in the entire state will talk to their child.
Yep.
Because they don't want to be labeled as committing conversion therapy just by helping a girl to feel comfortable. And these bills state that, they always have some clause like neutral exploration is okay so long as there's no perceived favorable outcome. Well, of course there's a favorable outcome.
But that's what they're doing.
Outcome. Right.
They're breaking their own law.
And a favorable outcome is a child who's not a lifetime medical patient, sterilized with body parts cut off.
Yep.
Unable to have a relationship, unable to ever have an orgasm. This is not me saying this. This is Dr. Marcy Bowers, who is a trans-identified male who has given birth to over 2,000 children and performed over 2,000 vaginoplasties. Dr. Marcy Bowers is the person who cut off Jazz Jennings' genitals when Jazz was still a child at the age of 17.
Jeez.
And creates these wounds, which they call neovaginas, where they basically invert the child's penis. But what happens with these kids, with these boys, because they went on puberty blockers when they were young, their penis never grew. So they don't have enough tissue to invert the penis to make a neovagina. So what do? They go and take out a slice of the kid's colon or their stomach lining.
Oh my God.
They cut it out and they use that to form this neovagina. And guess what? There's always complications, of course. I retweeted some detransitioner story. You can't really detransition once you've cut off all your genitals.
Right.
But this poor young man got the vaginoplasty done, had complications as they always do. And this man has developed what's called a urethrovaginal fistula. There's a hole. There's a passageway leading from this kid's urinary tract straight into his fake vagina. And he's been leaking urine for 5 years. Persistently. Gets infections. Could die really at any time if an infection got too bad. Yeah. Doctors can't fix it. And now they just want to close it up completely. Like, this is the sort of morbid stuff we get into when we talk about these things. It's not just helping a kid to be their true self. We love you. No, we're committing medical malpractice.
Yeah.
And physically harming tens of thousands of children across the Western world because we're lying to them, telling them that they can change their sex. There are over 42,000 girls and young women right now on GoFundMe raising money for top surgery, which is the euphemism they give a double mastectomy.
Yeah. 42,000. 42,000.
And if you search, you can go do it. Go do a search for top surgery on GoFundMe. The numbers will come up. If you do a separate search for double mastectomy, you'll find people who are raising money because they have cancer, valid.
Right.
And then you'll find a bunch more who are raising money for top surgery, but they're just not calling it top surgery. And GoFundMe actively targets this market. They have advertising for gender affirming care, helping these people to become their true selves. And no one can answer the question why we've seen a 4,000% increase. There you go. No one can answer the question for why we've seen a 4,000% increase in especially girls wanting to transition in just a few short years. If I ask people that on the street, the common response I'll get is, well, kids just feel safer now to be who they really are, whereas they didn't feel comfortable coming out before. And I'll say, okay, if that's true, where are all the 30-year-old women transitioning? Where are the 40-year-old women who've been trapped in the wrong body this whole time? Where are the 50-year-old women? Why is it all 14, 15, 16-year-olds?
That's a good point. What do they say to that?
Nothing.
Of course not.
Yeah, they have nothing. This is a social contagion. There's a friend of mine on Twitter. Her handle is Cry Mia River, MIA_Cry Mia River.
Yeah.
And she's written some really great threads about social contagions. And for example, bulimia used to affect girls in the single digits until it was written about. It was put into the DSM. And then media picked up on this eating disorder called bulimia. And magazines and newspapers started writing about it. And boom, as soon as they named it, it took off. And then it affected millions of girls.
I saw you post about this, and I thought that was very interesting when you first talked about this. Please continue, though. I didn't mean to stop you.
This is just a social thing. That's all it is. The kids who were goth 30 years ago, 20 years ago, they're trans now.
Right. It's the in thing. It's they're hearing about it, and we live in an era of victimhood, right? It's none of your fault. Nothing's your fault. Everything you do is someone else's fault. Here, let me give you an answer to the reason you feel this way. It's this person's fault. It's because you're not the gender that you are supposed to be. It's because of this political aisle. It's because of all of these things other than life's tough, and you got to learn how to be you in your body that you were given. Everything is all about also being a part of that group of victims. We have the internet too, which is a blessing and a curse, where people can find each other. Like I have you on my show. Like, it's great. I love that I can have these people who are making differences on my show, but at the same time, it's like they can reach the people that want to manipulate children in a way that they can reach them quicker. And honestly, I'd say we're starting to see a shift towards, because they're getting so crazy with this, and because of the internet, people are seeing how crazy they're getting with this. So it's almost like we're reaching this point. It's like there's like a tipping point where it can either go in one way where they win, or the other way where it all crumbles apart. Right? You feel like we're kind of nearing that, right? You're talking about all laws that are being put in place where kids are being taken from their parents because the government thinks that they know what's best for the children. It's like that's like Marxism, taking the government knows best what's for your kids. It's like state-run children. Like, that's a frightening premise, but that's where we're headed.
All these young adults, I joked, well, I didn't even joke, it's true. I wrote on Twitter one day, how long until the pride flag has a hammer and sickle on it?
Yeah.
And then right away, people sent me different designs that people had made where the pride flag had a hammer and sickle on it already.
Yep.
And these kids, they think they love communism and Marxism and all this. They have no idea.
They have no idea.
How do you think trans people would be treated under a communist society? Not well. But these kids, they love this authoritarianism, and they think capitalism is all evil, and they think parents are stupid and we're all dinosaurs.
Yep.
And it's really weird because when I was younger, if I saw some dude on the street with a message I didn't agree with, no one would have yelled and lost their brain on him. They would have just kind of ignored him.
Maybe there might be
there might have been a couple,
a bad apple, but like,
sure,
to the extent that you're facing, right?
It's it's remarkable. I'll get it when I go to Victoria. I'll get it every minute. I'll get verbal abuse.
Yeah. Yeah. My friend Savannah Hernandez was out trying to interview people. She was at the race when Will Thomas, I call him Will Thomas. His name's Will.
Sure.
won the women's national champion race, or the 500, whatever. He didn't win each one, but she was out there interviewing people, and she interviewed some of the girls that were on the team, and they were totally against it. They were like, this is ridiculous. Like, and Antifa surrounded her. Well, we use Antifa, because it might not have. Well, I'm more clarifying.
These people call themselves. Yeah, these people call themselves anti-fascists usually.
Right. When they're acting organization. They're acting the most fascist you can be. Like, you believe what we believe, or you're wrong, and you need to get out of here. It's like, you are the fascists. They don't get it. But she was surrounded just because she was asking questions. She wasn't, you didn't even know, obviously they knew her points from the internet, because she's very vocal on the internet about what she believes. But when she was there, I watched her live streams. She's talking, she's asking questions. That's it. She's just asking people, well, explain this to me. Explain what this trans sign that you have. Like, can you explain this to me? I'm not talking to you. Well, why not? Wouldn't you want your message out? Wouldn't you want to explain what your message is? No, I'm not talking to you. You're the enemy. It's like, my goodness.
Right. They believe there's, it's totally crazy, but they're trained to think this way.
Yep, they're trained.
We've seen what's happened on university campuses over the last few decades. We've seen how anything approaching conservative speech is just not allowed, and a riot will break out. My friend Jeff Younger, who lost his son to his crazy wife in Texas.
Yeah, I heard about that.
He went to give a talk at the University of Denton in North Texas a month or two ago. It went viral because basically a riot broke out outside. He got punched. He got spat at. The kids in the classroom where he was set to speak were all totally insane. And their whole strategy is just cancel all discussion. No conversation is allowed.
Yep.
Where I've had counter protests, I was in Prince George in northern BC, and about 50 counter protesters came, almost all young females, because that is the demographic that are most in love with this these days, which is totally backwards, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
And one woman tried to start talking to me, and right away another woman came and whispered in her ear something, and she just clammed up because they don't want communication happening.
Nope.
And that's all I'm trying to do, is have a calm conversation with people.
Yeah.
But they don't want it. In Ottawa, I got mobbed by 200 university counter protesters. I got punched. I got painted on. I got spat at. I got my rental car keyed.
Wow.
My signs were destroyed. There were police there as well. They all just watched. Literally just watched. But their whole strategy was just to cover me up with blankets and things so that nobody else could see me. And they just chant their mantras, which mean nothing. Trans rights are human rights. Yes, I agree with you. People who identify as trans are humans.
Yeah, of course.
They therefore have human rights.
Yeah, that's not what we're saying. It's like, they don't care what we're saying. I'm sure I've been blocked by many people on Twitter, and I'm sure that they can't stand my YouTube show because I'm very open about how I'm very much against teaching children this. Never in my entire schooling did any of my teachers talk to me about who they like to sleep with or who I identify as, or all I taught was science, math, gym class, just, regular stuff you should learn in school. None of it had anything to do with, it would have been weird if any of my teachers was like, by the way, I like to sleep with the same sex, and it's like, why are you telling me this? Like, why, and then they're fighting. And they're fighting against telling kids this, like young children, and I, like I said, like, I think I look at 19-year-olds and I'm like, that's a kid. Like, I think back to being 19 and I'm like, I was still a kid, no doubt in my mind. Like, I thought I knew everything and I was a freaking clueless person. Man, I'm just getting fed up with it. So let me ask you. Well, honestly, you kind of said it. You want to have calm conversations with them, but you're realizing we can't. So what do we do?
Well, I don't worry about, that's like 5% of the population, and I don't worry about them. My whole thing, mainly my goal is to talk to parents.
Yeah, smart.
Because parents don't know what's going on. How could they?
Right.
Media won't report on it. Media are starting to report on it. And in the year and a half I've been doing this, I've seen a huge change, actually, because there's all sorts of media now. Tucker Carlson and, people who are on Twitter who follow conservative circles, they're becoming aware of this stuff. But a lot of people aren't on Twitter. Most people just go through their regular life. They come home, they have dinner, they play with their kids, they put them to bed, they watch a Netflix show for an hour, and then one day their kid comes home from school, and unbeknownst to them, for the last 3 months, the school's been grooming their child to think that,
or years.
Yeah. Right. And now,
how did this happen? What's going on?
And now they can't get through to their own kid. But yeah, I'm just there to talk to people who have an open mind, who don't know what puberty blockers are. They don't know all this stuff that's going on. Because when parents learn what's going on, then they can talk to their kids. They can tell their kids the truth about all of this and give them that shield of truth. Because then when these lies come for them in school or on social media, if their kids already know the truth about all this, they're far more likely to get through this unscathed.
Right.
But kids are like a blank slate. And whoever gets to them first with their writings are going to have an impact on these children, especially these children who are having a tough time. I can't stress it enough. All these kids that end up in the gender clinic are the most vulnerable kids in our society, and they're being presented this false solution to whatever's going on with them. And their other mental health comorbidities like ADHD, depression, anxiety, whatever, are not being treated. These people are treating gender as though it's the source of all these other kids' problems. So it's a misdiagnosis, and then it's a mistreatment, and it's a mistreatment that results in irreversible damage, sterilization, and anorgasmic kids who are now lifelong medical patients.
I want to ask you, so I mentioned this Twitter space. There was a mother who came on and spoke, and she talked about how her daughter came home and showed her, oh no, it was her son. She has a son and a daughter, but the son came home and said, hey, I recorded my teacher saying this stuff to me. And the teacher was basically saying what we've been talking about, like, everyone can choose their gender. I want you to, really think about what your gender is and tell everyone what your gender is. And the son was like, I thought it was really messed up that this stranger, I didn't even know. It was like in the beginning of the school year, right? So he was like, I'm so uncomfortable talking about like this to like this person I don't know. And the mom was so upset, called a lawyer and is actually filing a lawsuit. And they tried to pay her off. They tried to give her $100,000 to shut up. And she was like, no way. Like, I'm taking this to the court because I think she said something along the lines of it was compelled speech. Like the teacher was trying to force her son to, I don't recall the exact details, but compelled speech is what stuck in my head. And I'm like, that's interesting. If parents have that kind of a tool to be like, if you're trying to like compel my child to do this kind of thing, that's something that grounds for me suing the school. And if parents knew that they had that ability, I think that might slow their roll a little bit or a lot of it, or hopefully, make them stop completely. I mean, of course, I'm wishful thinking here, but have you heard of that at all?
Yeah, and this is what I love about the US is people sue a lot more than up in Canada. I think it's harder to sue up here too, but there's a woman named January Littlejohn who was featured at Ron DeSantis's press conference when they passed the parental rights in education bill.
Right.
And unbeknownst to her, the school for months was working on a gender transition plan for her daughter and not telling her about it.
Wow. So
she's got a great lawyer named Bernadette Broyles who's representing her. There are some other people starting to take legal action, but we need a lot more of it for sure.
We do.
We need legal action against these doctors and these hospitals. But it's hard because in a lot of these states, there's only a 1-year statute of limitations. And you got to keep in mind, these kids are indoctrinated into a cult. For all practical purposes, this is a cult.
Agreed.
And it takes a long time to come out of that.
Yep.
And usually by the time they do and they have these deep regrets and they realize what's happened to them, the statute of limitations is passed. So, we need the legal people to get to work and they are, and I'm sure this will continue to build, because this is so wrong it can't last forever. People like myself are just trying to speed up the process wherein we tear this down.
Well, let me just tell you, I have a fairly decent platform. Anytime you want to spread the message about anything, you send it to me. I'll tweet it out. I'll talk about it on my show. I want to help support saving these children, man. I mentioned to you before the show, I don't have any kids, but I want to live in a world where I can be confident that my children are going to be safe, and this is a frightening thing that's happening that because I'm paying attention, I see it happening. And I want to help fight it. So you let me know, man. Anytime you want to come on my show, talk about it. Even if you want me to just tweet something out, just send it over to me and I'll retweet it, whatever.
Okay.
I want to help you.
I should say a couple things.
Sure.
So my Twitter, it's at Billboard Chris. You won't see it cut. Yeah. Okay. You won't see it come up when you're typing it into the search bar because Twitter is censoring me severely.
I'm sure.
My account about 6 weeks ago, someone manually changed my account so that it's adult content now. That's how my account is treated.
Wow.
So people have to enter their birth date to view my content.
Seriously?
Yep.
Wow.
You have to adjust your settings to allow sensitive content or none of my pictures will show up. I don't show up in people's feeds, and it's probably crippled engagement by like 70 or 80%. I was starting to get traction, and then Anyway, so just enter the whole name, you'll find me. But what was I going to say? Oh yeah, I'm heading to the Northeast in a couple weeks. I'm going to be at the University of Pennsylvania on the 27th. I'm going to a conference with a bunch of conservative media people on the 28th.
Okay.
On the 29th, I'll be in New York City. And on the 30th and the 1st, I think I'm going to be in Rhode Island with an awesome woman named Nicole Solis, who you should probably have on your show if you never have. Okay. She's called Nicole Solis, domestic terrorist, on Twitter.
Oh, goodness.
She's a lawyer. She sued her school district, or they sued her for asking a couple questions about curriculum, and she's awesome. But yeah, I'm going back east. If anyone wants to come out and hang out with me, that'd be great. And if I can plug my website a little bit, it's billboardchris.com, and I have a donate button, and I've quit my job to focus on this because I wasn't able to do both. And so I'm not a rich guy by any means. I rely on the support of people to keep me going around. So if you want to click on the donate button and send a couple bucks my way, that'd be great. But if you can't, that's totally fine. I just ask, really, the number one thing I ask of people is to have conversations.
Yep.
Because these conversations beget other conversations, and we create ripples, and you never know where those ripples will lead. Because the only way we put an end to this is by talking about it. And people have been too afraid to talk about it. But the more people who are talking about this, the less fearful it becomes. And they can't fire all of us. So we do whatever we can within our circles of influence. But we got to get informed, and we have to have conversations about this, because this is the biggest child abuse medical scandal in modern history.
I agree 100%. I have a couple super chats. I'm just going to read them. I don't know if there's any questions. Robert Wild says, I hope this makes Betty smile and Diana Francisco smile. What do you got on here? Sorry, my cat just jumped on me, and he's like soaking wet. I think it's raining outside right now. Okay. He's got a little door, so he can come and go as he please, but he's like, dude, you're soaking wet, man. Anyway, I hope this makes Betty smile and Dan and Francisco smile. Sorry I wasn't able to hear last night. My pain was too much. Thanks for all the kindness and love. Right on, Robert. I hope you're feeling better. Pirate Tomsky for 10 pounds. Wow. Thank you very much. Says, people who feel the need to physically attack others because of speech cannot defend their own position based on logic and reason, and have to look to remove that speech from society. Cough, Twitter. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, look at what's going on right now with Elon Musk with his hostile takeover of Twitter. Like, he, is essentially, all right, dude, hold on. My goodness.
My cat jumped up on my shoulder earlier today when I was having one of these talks.
Oh, really?
It's all good, yeah.
So, but look at all the freaking blue checks and people that are freaking out because Elon Musk is like, I want free speech. You know, I want Twitter to be a free speech place. He even said he wants it to be open source. So if anyone's being manipulated, like yourself, if you're being manipulated, you're going to be able to see it. They can't hide it anymore. No more behind closed door stuff. And I'm like, yes, like that's what we need. Well, they're calling it a hostile takeover days. It isn't necessarily hostile because he's offering more money than the shares are even worth. So he's like, I'll buy it off you guys for X amount. I think it's like 38% more than what the shares are even worth. So he's like overpaying just to get it. And it's like, dang. But they don't want to. It's the same thing as what Pirate's saying. They don't want to have like a logical, reasonable conversation because they can't. They can't because it'll poke holes. It'll show people how many holes are in their logic because it isn't logical. It's emotional and it's a cult. It's a cult.
It's a cult.
Accept it or you need to leave. You're out.
Yeah.
Done.
Yeah, and they separate people from their families.
Correct.
You know, they drive a wedge between the kid and their parents.
Yep.
They say, you know, we're your real family. We're your real community. We understand you. They don't. Mm-hmm. And then as soon as anyone leaves the trans cult, take the example of a detransitioner, someone who cut off their breasts, who went on testosterone for years, maybe even had a hysterectomy. Then they detransition. Do they get appreciated by the trans community for finding out who they really are then?
Nope.
No.
Good point.
They get told, oh, you were never really trans. And they get completely written off and cut off.
Yep.
What? Never trans? They just transformed their body.
Right.
But they were never...
Because they were told that was the answer.
These people don't want you to be your true self. They want you to be trans.
Yep.
That's all they want.
Yep. Yeah, and it's crazy.
But trans itself is a meaningless term. Ask anyone what it means. They can't tell you. Ask anyone what gender identity means. They can't tell you. Ask them what does it mean to be a woman?
Right.
Or so this girl thinks she's a boy. Okay. What does it mean to be a boy?
Right.
They got nothing. Does it mean having short hair? Why can't a girl have short hair?
Right.
Does it mean wearing pants and climbing trees?
Yeah,
or maybe she's attracted to girls. Does that make her a boy? No, that makes her a lesbian.
Right. And that's okay.
Yeah. But this is the biggest, this is the most homophobic movement in history.
It's true. I can't, man, when I realized that it's basically gay conversion therapy, like you're not allowed to be a gay or lesbian because it just means you're the opposite sex. We need you to come into this. It's like what you said, you know, the gay, like the LGB movement ended because, you know, they got gay marriage. Yeah. All right. Now you're treated normal. All right. Yeah. Well, shit. Now what do we fight for? Well, let's take it a step further. Now, we've got this whole new movement, but it's like for this movement to be accurate, there is no thing as being gay. Oh, well, you're just a woman. If you're into guys, that just means you're a woman. It's like, well,
lesbians are supposed to date men now with fully intact penises.
Female
because they identify as women. They're called transbians.
It's insane.
And
transbians.
Lesbians were one of the first to start speaking up against all this because all their lesbian spaces were getting taken over by men.
Right.
But yeah, it's totally nuts. And what was I going to say? Oh, I forgot. The whole thing is just, it's all crazy. There's no such thing as a transgender child. Oh, agreed. This has been funded back in the day, funded primarily by some billionaires. Jennifer Pritzker, Martin Rothblatt, John Stryker. Two of those gentlemen are trans-identified. One made a bust, a robotic bust in the image of his wife. It's a robot. Martin Rothblatt did this. And it's his goal to like upload her consciousness onto the internet one day because he believes that we can live forever on the internet, essentially. So this gets really culty. Essentially, they believe that our bodies are just a shell and we have a gendered soul. We don't just have a soul occupying a body. We have a gendered soul, which is totally reliant on... Yeah, it's all nuts.
This is a cult.
It's a cult. It's a cult. And the problem with cults is it takes a while to get people out of them because it just takes a while. And so my recommendation for people who are dealing with people who are struggling with this, don't fight with them. Don't try to force information into them. You got to ask them questions.
That's it right there.
They have to come to this from their own understanding. You will never convince someone who's been indoctrinated just by teaching them something. You have to get them thinking, and you have to get them challenging their own beliefs. So ask them these questions, like what does it mean to be a woman? What does it mean to have a gender identity?
Right.
What is gender? Why can't you just be a gender nonconforming male? Like, they got to get thinking, because kids' minds are so easily manipulated. And these autogynephiles, these men who get attracted to the idea of themselves being women and they get off to it, that's what some of these billionaires are. They have essentially been buying legitimacy for their own sexual fetish by spending money to get this installed in schools, to fund gender clinics all around the world. This one trans-identified male, Jennifer Pritzker, who's an heir to the Hilton fortune. And the whole Pritzker family is big with the Obama administration, by the way. They all have political designations and tons of money. And they've been pushing this transgender ideology for a while everyone was asleep. But as just one example of the type of things they do, Jennifer Pritzker, who's an American, sent a few $1 million to the University of Victoria here in British Columbia, in Canada, to fund the only chair in transgender studies in any university in the whole world.
Wow.
Because that's a good strategic place to do it. It's, the University of Victoria is where our legislature is. It's a very left-leaning place already. And you can see it in the community, because there's nowhere else in the world I've been to. And I've been all over the world, but Canada's kind of the epicenter for this. And the epicenter within Canada itself is Vancouver, and especially Victoria. And you can see it because they've had funding. And they do 1,000 workshops a year in the community. 1,000.
That's an interesting way of putting it too. Like, the rich people are trying to normalize this so they can be out with their fetishes, right? It's this weird sexual fetish that they have, that if they normalize it, then they could be out in the open with it. Maybe Michelle Obama can reveal what everyone thinks. I'm not saying anything, but the conspiracy theory is that she was his college friend. I don't remember the dude's name, but
I'm not into all that stuff. But I was just pointing out that
neither am I. I just know that I'm just making a joke.
I know. But the Pritzker clan was big with the Obamas, and they've been pushing this stuff for a long time. Yeah. And this Jennifer Pritzker character, as a middle-aged male, decided to transition. And this is pretty common for the middle-aged men who transition. They have this condition called autogynephilia, which is a fetish where they essentially get aroused by the idea of being a woman.
Okay.
And now you got some of these creeps who are now trying to buy legitimacy for this whole transhumanist, transgender agenda that they have. And the ultimate coup for them, of course, is getting this into schools.
Yep.
And they've succeeded.
Yep.
Because if you're graduating a few million kids that believe in this ideology every year, I mean, you've won the battle at that point. And now we're going to have to undo all this damage and get it out of our schools, which is probably a lot harder to do than getting it into the schools. Because to get it into the schools, all they had to do was say, we're so inclusive and loving. And all the schools just jump at it, right?
They're like, okay, we want to be inclusive and loving, because it's coming from a seemingly positive place, a seemingly moral place. But people aren't seeing the big picture, and it's dark. I mean, and look at just DeSantis passing that bill, how much they fought, and how, I mean, the media, my goodness, the celebrities, the freaking corporations that helped fight against it, but he passed it. And now these other states are starting to pass stuff that are similar. I don't even think it goes far enough. K through 3, K through all.
I don't think so either.
Any school, no school should teach any of this shit, period.
Yeah. I mean, I do think, for example, just today, my little one, my 10-year-old, she's in grade 4, they had a lesson on puberty today.
Okay.
And I talked to the teacher. I actually got a notification that they were going to be teaching it. I don't know if that's because of my activism or not, but I did make sure that they weren't going to talk about gender identity, which they didn't. But I do think kids need to learn about puberty.
Of course.
Ideally, they should learn that at home. Yeah. Ideally, I think they should learn it at home. And we got a book for our girls to read about puberty, and they've all read it a few times.
Okay.
But some kids don't get that at home.
That's
so
true.
There does need to be some basic sex education about biology.
Bring back the family unit. But let's make freaking families strong again. I mean, we're very focused on a certain issue, but a lot of issues in life are so multifaceted, right? There's all these different things that have led us into this. Having a strong family unit, the kids are getting validation from their parents. They don't need it from others. They aren't feeling lost as much. They're not needing to find a place where they feel that they belong, because when you have a strong family unit, or a strong father figure, or I don't know what your situation is, but it seems like you're a part of their lives, and that's important. That's important.
We're a normal nuclear family: mom, dad, 2 kids. Yep.
I love it. We need more of that, because you're preparing them for that kind of stuff, and we need more of that. That is such a huge part of, I feel, the downfall of what we're seeing is because of that lack of communication in the family and a solid family situation. Without that, life is so uncertain. Who knows? Like, everyone's so different, but without that solid foundation that you get from having that solid family growing up, anything can be unstable then. Everything is. So when they're saying, hey, your your mental gender identity it feels unstable, well, let me show you what you can use to solidify it. When it's in reality, you actually mentioned this multiple times. You said all these people, they're going through other things. It's not just they're using this as the answer to all these other issues when it has nothing. They're not treating the actual problem at all. They're just saying, here's this. It's like a transgender Band-Aid. Boom. Just use this and keep using this forever. Keep buying these Band-Aids from me, and I got you. It's like, man.
Yeah, these activists, they treat it as bigotry to even question what's going on with the child.
Right.
Because how dare you? It's just their gender identity. And how dare you question it? Because now you're questioning their gender identity.
Mm-hmm.
And you're a bigot.
How dare you?
But I'm telling you, and
go ahead.
Yep. Oh, I was just going to say, I'm going to read an email real quick.
Sure.
This is what's going on in high schools.
Okay.
So this is an email from a mom who was trying to find a counselor for her daughter. Okay. This is a mom in Washington State.
Okay.
And it's a long email. I'm just going to read the first paragraph here. I'm parent of an ROGD daughter, so rapid onset gender dysphoria. She's 17. She told us about 4 years ago that she's trans. So at 13. That was after being a demi-boy, a nano-boy, asexual, demi-romantic, and non-binary.
My goodness.
This is a 13-year-old who's on her 6th identity. This is standard among girls. Boys aren't doing this nearly as much. It's happening. But all these kids in high school, because the activism for queer theory has gone so overboard, all these kids, so many of these girls especially, they need to have some special identity. Because to be cis heteronormative is boring. To be a lesbian is boring. That's not cool.
Well, that's what I said earlier. It's the cool thing to do. It's suddenly they go from being this, maybe they're not attractive, maybe they're not getting as much attention as like the stereotypical beautiful girl in class, or many, among many other things. And then suddenly they're like, we have this group, and it's like, well, hey, if you identify as something different, hey, now you're special. Now here's your reason to be special. So now,
what kid doesn't want to be special?
Exactly. What kid doesn't want to be special and get attention, right? Suddenly they have this group that's giving them attention. Oh, but all they're doing is saying, they're like absorbing them into their freaking cult. Like, well, we're gonna love you and everything, and it's like, but in the long run,
social media
shit.
Dude, and then they get on social media, and
that's what I was saying about the internet. The internet is a blessing and
they get
huge curse.
Thousands of likes, 1,000 positive comments.
I'm trans.
Dopamine hits. Woo! Now, how does a child back out of this?
Exactly. Because those
It's
people,
embarrassing.
those same people are the worst. They're the
Yeah.
least inclusive. They're the least accepting. Like you said, if
Yeah.
once they detransition, or as you said, like it's a little late, but whatever. Like once they realize, you know what, I do feel like my original body, like that is who I am. That you're done, pushed out.
Too embarrassing.
We're just gonna keep going to the new breed to like keep it up,
Yeah.
so they can
Their whole friend
continue it.
circle is trans.
Right.
These kids are growing up online. We haven't even
Exactly.
really. I mean, we could have a whole show just on this.
I
For the first
know.
time in human history, kids are growing up online.
That's
Look how bad
so
social
scary.
media is for us.
It's
Like, it's hard
horrible.
for me. It's terrible. It's hard for an adult. For a kid, my gosh, parents, if you do one thing in your life, have talks with your kids before they get
Oh
to
yeah.
the age where they're on social media.
That's the
And get these
biggest thing that I've
kids,
got going for
get
when I
them,
have children.
get
Please
these kids
continue.
to come to an understanding on their own that they don't want social media. My girls don't want it because they know nothing good is going to come from it. But I
That's
had those
awesome.
conversations with them earlier on, and I let them come to this conclusion on their own, like by talking about it. And the best time to talk with your kids, for me anyway, I like bedtime. I still read to my kids, and it's that time at night when things are quieting down.
Yeah.
That's when they start talking about their day, and that's when they start revealing whatever happened at school, and you can have these calm heart-to-heart conversations and get through to them a bit more. But you got to get to them before they become addicted to social media, because it's the worst, especially if your kid is not neurotypical, if they're neurodivergent at all, if they have autism or whatever.
Yep.
And they get roped into this, you're going to have a really tough time getting them out.
Well said. Well said, Chris. That's man, major respect for that. We got a couple more super chats. We got Allison C celebrating 6 months as a member. Thank you, Allison. Says, I only wear pants, never skirts. I work in a male-dominated field. I don't wear
She's a
makeup
boy.
or low-cut shirts. I'm still female. Stereotypes
What?
don't define who or what
Prove it.
I am. Good for you, Allison. I appreciate that.
Good for you, Allison. Thank you.
MPOW says, what's your thoughts on Brandon, Tina, and violence? I have no idea what that means. Do you know what that is? Nope. Sorry, MPOW. We don't know what that means. Robin Cosby for $20. Thank you, Robin. Says, my brother would play with Ninja Turtles and had a Logan Cabbage Patch doll. I played with my brother's toys and hated wearing dresses and was very much a tomboy. I am nowhere close to being gay or trans. It is nuts already. Yeah. Who cares what you play with? It's just so silly. Like they're using anything to push their cult. That's really what it is.
Yeah. Half the women I talked to were tomboys when they grew up.
Yeah. And that's
more fun.
It is.
They're playing in trees and getting dirty.
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly.
Great.
Right. What is it?
Doesn't mean they're a boy. This whole thing is just so mental.
It's mental. Yep. Sleep is the cousin of death. Says, what an interesting name. Says, should a parent lose their children because they circumcise their children? It's hard to care when religious normalized this, in my opinion. Good show. That's a great question. I don't know
that a lot.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know much about it, but it isn't natural, right? I mean, men do have
it's
that there.
I mean, it's an old religious practice, right?
Right.
But it's also not nearly as damaging as what we're talking about here.
Yeah,
they probably shouldn't be doing it. I know some kids, when they get older, they have some problems and it needs to be done medically in some cases. But no, I don't think they should be doing it. But it's also not nearly on the scale of what we're talking about here.
Right. It's not the same. But it is a good question. Yeah. April says, hi, everyone. Mrs. Quesadilla here with a David update. He's back in the ICU, about to undergo emergency surgery for internal bleeding. Oh, my goodness. April, I'm sending you some really good vibes. And, of course, Quesadilla, who is an avid supporter of mine, I hope you pull through. That's, I'm sure, quite frightening for you, but sending you some good vibes, and that everything will go well, and that they fix this. So stay strong, April. Preston says, does a woman that transitions to male 18 to 25 need to register with the Selective Service, or can they remove their name from the same system? I have no idea. I don't know.
Oh, I mean, I don't know about name change laws. I'm sure every state has different things going on, but
That's right.
On your passports now in the United States of America, you can just put an X for your sex.
That's
new.
crazy. That's crazy, man.
Joe Biden.
Freaking Joe Biden. Don't even get me started.
He campaigned on this. During the campaign, he had a town hall on CNN or something where a mother of a trans kid, the mythical trans kid, was there. And Biden's fully supportive of all this. And he went further, stating that it's not the job of prison officials to decide what gender an inmate is. It's up to the inmate. And so
now
California
there's like a 60% uptick in men going to prison identifying as women.
If you're
60%.
If you're in prison for 20 years, and you're in some high security man's prison, well, these women's prisons, especially in Canada, they're like way more posh. They get little houses to live in. Some of them even have knives and kitchens. But if you're in a man's prison and you can just say you're a woman, one of this lower security women's prison, come on.
Why wouldn't you? Of course.
And you're mentally ill, maybe as well. Like, of course they're going to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's insane. It's like,
here we go.
It's like all of our politicians forgot that bad people exist in the world,
Yeah. What, like, if bad people exist, people, is crazy. MPOW actually explains, says Brandon Tina was a trans individual who was murdered, made famous in the films Boys Don't Cry with Hilary Swank. Never saw that movie. So
I did see that movie, but I totally forget. But let me talk about that real briefly.
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
Because there's a huge myth out there that trans people are being murdered at some terrible rate. I'm going to retweet a YouTube video that this awesome dude made.
Okay.
The actual murder rate of transgender people in the United States of America is less than half that of the general population. Okay. In all of 2021, it was something like 53 people out of more than 1 million. And when you dig into each of these individual cases, they're not even all murders. And some of them, these were people being killed by their lovers. So that's obviously not hate crimes.
Right.
Some of them were killed while they were committing a crime. A lot of them were in Puerto Rico, which has a way higher murder rate anyway. And I'm not, of course, justifying this, but I'm just saying the murder rate is actually lower. Technically, they're safer than you and I.
Well, that's not what they're saying.
That's because they're lying. The rule of thumb is if it's coming out of a trans activist's mouth, it is a lie. That's a very safe rule of thumb.
Yep.
In England, there hasn't been a murder in 3 years. There's only been like 8 in the past 10 years. Again, the murder rate is way lower than the general population, way lower than that of women. Same thing in Australia, where we have these statistics. It's just a myth, like all of it.
That's not surprising.
Yeah.
Chris, thank you so much for coming on the show. I feel, I'll be honest, I heard some horrible things, but I'm glad I know about it, right? I know. No. I want people to know about it. I want to know. I want people to realize how the dark side of what's going on, so I really appreciate what you're doing. Thank you. And remember, just anytime, just let me know, send me a DM and I got you. I'll help promote you. Please go give him a follow and check out his website, support him if you can. Down in the description below, you can find his Twitter account and also his YouTube page, or actually I didn't add your YouTube, but I'm sure
Billboard, you can, Chris. I haven't done much on it, but yeah. And my contact info is on my website too. So if anyone wants to email me or text me or whatever, it's all in there.
In the description, you could definitely find that. So thank you very much. And everyone, I will be back, of course, tomorrow. It's Friday. I'm trying to get Nick Rekieta to come on my show. He may or not be able to, but either way, it's Friday, so you know what that means. I'll be jamming out and hanging out with you guys. I have actually kind of a surprise idea that I'm gonna talk to you guys, because my Friday shows kind of changing up the thing a little bit, and I think you're gonna enjoy it. So thank you very much, Chris. Good luck with everything you're doing. I really appreciate you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.